our divorce. Tate didn't even bother coming to the hospital, but I'd wanted my children to have a father. I had hopes that he would eventually come around. So I put his name on their birth certificates and, at my father's insistence, filed for child support. For a few years, he was no more than a check in the mail. His measly $700 a month barely put diapers on their asses and clothes on their backs. My parents paid for their daycare so that I could finish school and make sure we always had food on the table. They'd already been paying for my apartment since I'd started college, so they simply upgraded me from a 1-bedroom to a 2, and we made it. It was hard as hell, but we did it. The plan had always been to return to my hometown of Cedar Grove after school, but my best friend Gina, who was sticking around to work for her cousin Dylan at his new practice, begged me to join her. I'd already completed my master's in psychology, so Dylan paid for our additional training, and once we'd completed our obligatory hours of observation, Gina and I went to work at No Law Sexual Health. Around the time the boys turned 5, Tate suddenly decided he wanted to be a part of their lives. You know, after the hard stuff, the crying, constant diaper changing, and up-all-night feedings. Legally, he had visitation rights, so I couldn't stop him from taking them on his weekends. Sometimes he did. Other times, he didn't. He gets them just often enough to ruin all of my hard work, returning 2 disrespectful little shits. And just when I've finally whipped their little asses back into shape, he miraculously shows up and the cycle starts all over. But the worst part of him blowing in and out of their lives, by far, is the way he hurts my boys. There is nothing worse than seeing the disappointment on my babies' faces when that man promises them he'll show and then doesn't. For a very long time, it was impossible for me to date. Between being a single mother to twin boys and living almost 3 hours away from any family, it was difficult to find time for myself. I barely had time to shower. Trust me, a man was the least of my worries. But on the weekends the twins left to go to Tate's house, I found myself with nothing but time. Gina grew tired of watching me mope and declared his weekends girls' weekends. I had forgotten how fun it was to drink, dance, and to not have to be the responsible one all the time. And I may have allowed myself to get a little carried away. While we were out one night, almost 3 years ago, I met a Latin god by the name of Alex, and apparently got drunk enough to forget that sperm makes babies. Alex and I had only been seeing each other for a few months. Wait, that sounds so formal. I'll just call it like it was. We'd been fucking, but only while the boys were away. I was obsessed with Alex's body and addicted to the things he did to mine. After having been responsible for my own orgasms for so long, it was nice to pass that task over to his more than capable hands and, appendage. When I found myself unable to get out of bed and puking my guts up for a solid week, Gina showed up at my house with a drugstore bag which she shoved into my chest before she ushered me into the bathroom. She wished me luck and shut the door. I don't know why it hadn't dawned on me before. Maybe I was in denial. But when I saw that little rectangular box, my reality hit me like a ton of bricks. Not again. If you do the math, you already know that little booger came out with a big fat positive. I was 30 years old, unmarried, and pregnant with my 3rd child. When I told Alex, he offered to pay for an abortion. I may have been irresponsible in failing to use protection, but I was not going to end my pregnancy. I'd already come to terms with the fact that there was going to be a baby. The only question in my mind at that point was whether or not he would be involved. I wasn't fooling myself. We were not a couple, and I had no intention of trying to force